Hey guys, there's been a bit of movement, whispers, not headlines, that Lancashire Police might be receiving information from members of the public in relation to Jay Slater's disappearance and death in Tenerife. To be clear, there's no confirmation of an active investigation, no suggestion that Lancashire Police are treating this as a criminal case, just that people are sending them things, messages, theories, maybe tips. And that raises a powerful question. What could Lancashire Police actually do with this information? How far can an investigation go when there's no solid evidence? Just suspicion, history, and unanswered questions? Let's walk through that. First, we have to understand the issue of jurisdiction. Jay disappeared in Tenerife, Spanish territory. That means it falls under the authority of the Spanish police. Lancashire Police can't just open their own parallel investigation into something that happened abroad unless very specific legal conditions are met. They would need one of three things: evidence of a UK-based offense, a formal request from the Spanish authorities, or probable cause to believe that someone in the UK committed a criminal act related to Jay's disappearance or death. So if Lancashire Police were to get involved, they'd need a real legal basis. Let's start with Tom Hilton. Jay was convicted in 2023 of assaulting Tom, an incident that left Tom unconscious, a brutal attack, and the court took it seriously enough to issue a community order against Jay. That history exists. It's on record. Because of that past, there's been speculation, especially online, that Tom might have had a motive for revenge. And sure, when someone ends up dead under strange circumstances, people start looking back at past conflict. That's human nature. But legally, that history on its own isn't enough. There's no evidence placing Tom in Tenerife. No confirmed travel, no airline tickets, no passport stamps in the public domain, no phone pings, no CCTV. There's nothing concrete to say he was anywhere near Jay at the time of his disappearance. So what could Lancashire Police actually do based purely on that historic beef? If people are submitting tips or names to Lancashire Police and Tom's name comes up repeatedly, police could, at their discretion, do some very limited preliminary checks. But we have to be clear about the limits of that. They could check PNC records, that's the Police National Computer, to verify his status, location history, and any ongoing criminal matters. They could cross-reference travel databases, like passenger manifests or passport activity, but only if there's legal reason or cooperation from border control. They could review open-source intelligence, anything available online, social media posts, public location tags, to assess whether there's any suggestion he traveled. They might even, informally, ask for a voluntary statement if a credible concern was raised. But what they cannot do, and without evidence, is compel Tom to hand over his phone, search his home, or detain him for questioning. That would require probable cause, a real lead, or some kind of forensic, digital, or testimonial link tying him to the event. Even checking travel isn't automatic. It would need a proper legal basis, or cooperation with agencies like the Home Office. Otherwise, Tom remains someone with a past conflict, not a present suspect. Now let's talk about Ayub Qasim and Stephen Rokas. Rocky. These are arguably the two most central figures in the public's mind when it comes to Jay's final hours. Why? Because they were reportedly the last people seen with him, up in that remote Airbnb in Moscow. And because both men have serious criminal records. Let's be direct. Both Ayub and Rocky have served prison sentences for drug offenses, not minor charges. Serious, organized-level drug trafficking convictions. That kind of history shapes how people view them. It raises questions. It always will. But in UK law, prior convictions do not equal probable cause. You can't investigate someone now because of what they did in the past. Unless there's current, credible evidence linking them to Jay's disappearance or death, they cannot legally be treated as suspects. There's also a growing inconsistency in the timeline of how long Jay had known Ayub. Lucy initially told media that Jay had only met Ayub that night. But Brad later claimed that Jay had known Ayub since the start of the holiday. More recently, a photo has surfaced that appears to show Jay and Ayub together months before the trip. The photo isn't high quality and it's not verified, but it raises more doubt about the claim that this was a chance meeting. That inconsistency matters. If police were reviewing the case, they would want to understand why the story changed and whether it points to a deeper relationship that could help explain what happened in Masca. And then there's Rocky's recent behavior online. In one of his TikTok live streams, a friend of Jay's entered the chat and began to make a bold statement, suggesting he knew what had really happened to Jay. Rocky, instead of shutting it down or denying it outright, became visibly flustered and did not challenge the comment. He appeared thrown, uncomfortable, and didn't reaffirm his innocence in that moment. If Lancashire Police were monitoring that interaction, it could be considered a potential red flag. On its own, it's not evidence, but it could be a sign worth cross-referencing with other digital or testimonial data. If a known associate of Jay is implying insider knowledge and a central figure in the timeline doesn't deny it, police may choose to review the live stream, identify all participants, and potentially explore follow-up interviews. These sorts of unscripted moments, especially when they're archived online, can become part of an evidentiary timeline if paired with supporting context. So again, what could Lancashire Police realistically do? If they were receiving tips involving Ayub or Rocky, they could start by checking internal intelligence systems. Has either man come up in recent UK-based criminal activity? Are there known associates? Could they be linked to any kind of coercion, violence, or exploitation of young men? They could monitor public digital content, Instagram, TikTok, live streams, anything that's out there. If these men post material that suggests guilt, motive, or inconsistency in their stories, that's fair game for review. But again, unless a credible witness steps forward, or unless a forensic link appears, such as verified messages from Jay, GPS coordinates, or photographic evidence, Lancashire Police are limited. What about travel records? Could they check where Ayub and Rocky were before and after Jay's disappearance? In theory, yes. If a tip-off gave them justification. If someone said, they flew back suspiciously early, or there's a bag missing, or they changed phones afterward, that might be enough to look deeper. But short of that, there's no gateway. They can't force Ayub or Rocky to cooperate. They can't search their homes or seize devices without a UK-based offense or international request. Even the alleged message from Jay, the one where he supposedly sent a photo about a stolen watch, implying he and the others had taken it, is not enough unless it's verified. Who received it? When? On what platform? From which phone? If that can't be proven, it's noise, not evidence. And again, we need to recognize a crucial fact. Both of Jay's phones were recovered and analyzed. Authorities have confirmed that nothing significant was found. No evidence of a struggle, no key messages, no hidden communications that raised red flags. So even that potential forensic route, for now, leads nowhere. Now let's look at Lucy and Brad, the two friends Jay traveled with. Lucy was the one who spoke out publicly first. She gave interviews, described the night out, and explained how Jay ended up in a car with two men she said he'd just met. According to her televised account, she said she was back at her apartment in Los Cristianos when Jay called her in distress that morning, claiming he was lost in the hills. She says she became concerned and raised the alarm. But now we've got something new, something that directly contradicts that version of events. In a recently released court document from the Spanish authorities, Lucy's official statement to police says she stayed with Jay in a residence that morning. In other words, she was physically there, not miles away in Los Cristianos, like she originally claimed on TV. That is not a minor detail. That's a complete shift in the timeline. And her proximity to Jay during what could have been his final hours. So the question is, which version is true? Because they can't both be. And in any investigation, especially one involving a death, timeline and location are everything. Now, why does that matter from a policing point of view? Because contradictory statements like that, especially one made publicly versus one given to police, could trigger further questioning, even from Lancashire Police. Even though the incident happened in Spain, this is about a UK national making potentially false or misleading claims, and that opens up room for action. So what could Lancashire Police actually do with that information? If they were reviewing this, the contradiction could enable them to invite Lucy in for a voluntary clarification interview, request cooperation from the Spanish police to examine the full version of her statement, cross-reference travel logs, hotel check-ins, phone data, and social media timestamps to assess her actual location on the morning of Jay's disappearance. Treat her not as a suspect necessarily, but as someone who may have obstructed the search or investigation by misrepresenting key facts. If new evidence came to light that she intentionally misled authorities, that could potentially move the case into the territory of perverting the course of justice or withholding material information in a suspicious death. And then there's Brad, noticeably absent during the first 12 days of the search. He didn't appear in appeals. He didn't speak to media. For many, that silence looks strange, especially from someone who was supposed to be one of Jay's closest mates. Again, let's be clear. Acting distant isn't illegal. There's no crime in staying quiet. But if either Lucy or Brad misrepresented their location, their actions, or their knowledge of Jay's state of mind or who he was with, that becomes legally relevant. Police don't need you to be guilty of a crime to become a key witness, or even a person of interest. They just need reasonable grounds to believe you might be withholding something. Because in a case like this, where minutes mattered, telling the truth about where you were and when could be the difference between a live rescue and a body recovery. So if Lucy was with Jay that morning, as her police statement seems to suggest, and only later said otherwise in public, then the question becomes, what really happened at that residence? And why is the story changing now? That's not internet speculation anymore. That's the kind of inconsistency that should be looked at through a legal lens. Thanks for listening, and as always, I love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments below.